Oh, okay. So you're just going to lose in the finals to me. I understand.
You win that game and you feel good, but you got Sentinels right up next, so it's like it's not that great.
What's going on, man? Come on.
Russians are built different.
Definitely. Welcome everybody to another episode of Curveball. My name is James Banks and I will be your host as we start to break down not only the biggest event in Valorant history, but probably the most important one, because finally we are getting all the teams together from around the world that were able to qualify. This is going to be the Valorant Masters Reykjavik, and to talk about all this, to break it all down as we preview and go through the madness that is this big event, I've got a couple of fine gentlemen joining me. To start off with, we've got fRoD, a legendary player throughout the history of esports, now heavily involved in Valorant, as well as MitchMitchman, who has been doing a lot of the commentary, the analysis, and well, let's take a look at the bracket, right? Let's start to look down all of this and understand what is going on here. Now, it's a more interesting start, maybe not kind of a normal bracket when you look at it, how it all pans out, because we have the four teams that start off in this kind of bit before they get to the upper bracket quarters in there. Now, for me, right, this obviously is a little bit nicer for a team like Liquid and Sentinels, who came through first in their part of things, right? So they get the bonus going in there in it overall. But when it comes to the other teams that have to fight it out here, I'm going to just look at the round of 10 to start off with. Fnatic versus Crew, version 1 versus Crazy Raccoon. I'm going to start with you, fRoD, because version 1, from what we've been hearing from some of the EU teams already, they maybe have just had a bit of a kind of tough time coming into EU practice-wise. Have you been learning much?
What I will say is that obviously it's going to pose a little bit of an issue when you have a player that's like a staple in your team not being able to go to the LAN or the the qualifier. So, but at the end of the day, I really do think that just knowing Jammies and having been with him in Beast Coast, knowing that there is a relationship there with like Zelsis and Vanity and them with Jammies as well prior to. So I know that they have that flexibility now. How are they going to make it work? I think that this is where, with last minute kind of things, are kind of getting a lot of things out. But, you know, this is a team that's been counted out in a lot of times. So I understand they may have like some sort of obstacles to get there. But these are guys that, you know, they've consistently proven us wrong in some of those very crucial moments. And what I'm curious to see is more of like the LAN theme, you know, like this is not just the online competition and everything like that. I'm curious to really see how these guys compete on LAN, and then how all the pressure and everything goes, and you know how all the other teams respond to this, because this is a you know a good LAN first line for a lot of guys and things like that. So kind of really excited to see how they respond. But I do think that V1 will be able to have a good showing in that very first game, you know, and then we'll see how they go straight into, you know, the fire with Liquid. But you know, I think it could go well.
Now, Mitch, coming into Crazy Raccoon, we have seen a little bit from them. We've heard some stories as well. But I'm going to take you back to what was the very beginning of Valorant. Remember when we were like talking to Sliggy and watching what he was doing? He had such a keen eye on the Japanese and what they were doing and their compositions coming in there. Is there going to be a bit of surprise factor, or is the meta kind of rolled out in a way that you think like you can kind of guess how it's going to be played out?
I think between those two teams, there's definitely a little bit of a tough matchup, right? I don't know who I'd pin to come out on top, but when I look at the Japanese scene right now, you have to give massive props towards Crazy Raccoons, because it isn't like these guys are coming in as the team that we expected to go on through. Absolute Jupiter were without a doubt the team that we were expecting to see at Masters. In fact, the conversation, we'll get onto it later, obviously, when it comes to Korea, the conversation is going to be, you know, we were going to see Vision Strikers, Absolute Jupiter, like getting to see these teams on the international stage, and we end up with neither. And this just shows that there's more depth to the region than we'd expect. And obviously Crazy Raccoon managing, I mean, they certainly timed it right to overthrow the kings of the region. Now they come into Masters. The question for me, though, really is how does the Japanese meta, how's it going to match up? You know, like for me, the main question is in terms of facing an NA team, firepower, right? The NA teams, they love their double duelists. They love to play that hyper-aggressive style. And when you look at the Japanese guys, that's maybe where they can have a little bit of a slip-up. You know, when it comes to heads-up duels.
Yeah, and what I want to say about a little bit of that too is like a lot of these teams that are making a lot of these upsets, they cater a lot of strategies specifically to beat specific teams, and they've been able to topple their region doing so. You know, American Valorant, you know, for better or for worse, is a lot more aggressive and very exec disrupting, a lot of disrupting the execs. So for me, it's like, are these teams going to be able to get into the positions with 5 people alive to get into those situations? Are we going to be able to cut off certain points and maps and choke them out? And can they make this happen with 3v3, 4v4? Because, you know, even with just seeing a lot of those games and seeing all these execs like in some of these specific regions, you just see a lot of 5v5 action, 5v5 post plant situations. And I mean, That doesn't really happen a lot here, especially in NA. There's a lot of clutch situations, 2v2s, 3v3s, because of the constant aggression. So that to me is kind of where I'm curious to see like where it all happens. And you know, it's hopefully V1 kind of removes that space from them to not let them get much of the execs off and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's all about learning what you can, right, from seeing what the teams do in some of these other regions, but it's also if you can adapt to it on the fly is a whole different thing when it comes to these games. Yeah. Now, the other game in the same part of this bracket, right, I'm looking at Fnatic here, and fRoD, do you know, one thing I get a little bit of, like, realization when I look at this, I come back to your, like, complexity days, how the first complexity was put together, you know? What you get with Fnatic, you got some guys that were kind of very well high up within the EU Valorant scene. Then they make drastic changes. They bring in some players that a lot of people actually laughed at from the community and thought, like, why were these guys being picked up? And yet they run straight through after making drastic changes. They get it. They get the spot, and no one would have predicted them to be able to do that. Were you impressed to see them even be in that situation, considering all of this?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, I thought that Guild was going to win that game. I had them predicted. You know, I think of them very highly. So for me, I like those teams in that storyline because to me, those are the players that hunger factor, and that is one of those like intangible things that people don't really talk about a lot. And you know that kind of goes into the next part of like, not right now, but like even like to the Brazilian region. You know, like we all know that like those guys, like they just have that in them, and it's like I'm just dying to see the Brazilians on land, because it's like for them it's a battle just to get to the land, but when they get there, it's like the passion and the drive just shines through. Like for me, that kind of passion that these guys have to kind of be seen as maybe the bad news bearers of sorts, or unwanted in some sort of cases, but proving wrong. I mean, that's exactly what you want in a storyline, to be able to not only just like potentially qualify for an event, but to potentially win the whole thing. Not, you know, like it's not just like qualifying is not enough, but I think Fnatic is just potentially trying to make some sort of statement in this initial round to carry it through, because like you win that game and you feel good, but you got Sentinels right up next, so it's like it's not that great.
Yeah. I think Fnatic are ready as well for pretty much anything, and this is why I put out a tweet recently saying these guys are going to be the easy champions of Masters for me. Number one spot, easy peasy. And the reason for that is we've seen them not only overcome some of the best EU teams, and yes, the Liquid BO5 was something to look at, but when it comes to BO3s, they're much more stable. Split was a kind of left field pick. I know they've been cracking it a lot now coming into Masters. But the thing for me is, when you look at a team like Crew, this is someone that very much, I wouldn't say stole the identity, but learned from the identity of the likes of your Fanatics. They're not coming in with like your double duelist and looking to pull out like NA, Korea, CIS, like just aim star and out of them relying on their aim. Instead, they're coming in with very much the tactical side is their bread and butter. And up against Fnatic, I don't think they'll be able to beat them. When I look at further on teams like specifically NA, that match that Fnatic had versus Gambit, they trashed them. And at the point where you can destroy what I would consider the NA of EU in the CIS team at Gambit, when you can defeat them at their best, I think, you know, Defo especially, dude's unbelievable. I've even seen some of the NA players, you know, they're coming over here, they're scrimming against these guys, your CNEDs, your Defos, and they're tweeting out like, what's going on, man? Come on.
Russians are built different.
Definitely.
Honestly, like, and they so much skill on these like 16, 17-year-olds. It's unreal. So I think that when Fnatic showed us that they can trash Gambit, that they have those protocols to beat down your early aggression and those duels that you want to take, you're running into one or two guys or two or three guys who are ready to shut that down, that their map control is, I don't think, bested by anyone within this tournament. So I think that honestly, Sentinels, if they come up against them, if they win versus Crew, come up against Sentinels, I think that's an easy matchup for them. Honestly, like in terms of the game itself, right, we're probably looking like 3 matches. I'm not going to say it's a 2-0, but to me, Fnatic should be winning that every single time.
So you guys have already touched on one team that is very important here. One of the teams that definitely doesn't suffer from being less experienced, not going to these events, is Sentinels, because they're all coming from games where they've played very high level. They're used to this kind of work. But is it really, when we look at this, like Sentinels coming in, should they be considered the clear favourites, or is it maybe a little bit closer on how it all pans out? Because obviously since we've had TenZ come in, it's looked very comfortable for these guys, I'd say.
I mean, TenZ has been unreal. Let's just get that out of the way straight off the bat. Nobody who's been paying attention to any of just the Twitter clips, you know, if you're following some of the NA pros, you're following the VCT channels, you're seeing this guy just running around destroying people, and that's been the way from day one. When I think back to Counter-Strike, When I first saw him, it was in a qualifier for IEM Chicago. Dude was running down mid on Inferno. I'm not even kidding, 360 no-scoping people with an AWP. That was disgusting. It was an early round, like round of 126 or something, but it was still insane to see the confidence and the skill level he had to back it up. So when it comes down to Valorant, he's going to be one of the scariest people on the server. But do they have, are they clear favorites? Well, I've already said, right? To me, Fnatic are clear favorites to take this one down. What it ultimately comes down to as well, though, is going to be the LAN experience. Not a lot of teams have it. NA, EU, we don't. We've been in lockdown the whole time. I think there was some LANs in Japan. A lot of their guys were in studio, but certainly in Korea, they were banging out LANs left, right, and center. So their players have got a leg up in terms of playing in those kind of environments already. So NewTurn maybe getting a little bit of an edge there in that environment. But yeah, Sentinels, I don't know. I wouldn't call them clear favorites. Top 3, I think, is a pretty solid bet for them, but I really just don't see them taking down Fnatic.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your point, and like the reason why I disagree with it is simply because, like, I first of all, I agree on the TenZ thing. Guy's an animal, and I think that the TenZ difference and the TenZ factor is something that you have to fully respect. Now, when you look at everyone outside of TenZ in this factor, I mean, these guys all have some LAN experience, like whether it's the Shazams of the world, the Six of the world, like Zom's playing many different games, like from the Overwatch and stuff like that. Dapper, like playing like in New York, local LANs, like these guys are guys that do have that LAN experience. So if there is a situation that, you know, someone might say, oh, well, TenZ may not show up or he may have a bad game, like, I feel like they got plenty of guns and gunners on that team that are going to be able to carry that load. And that's where I'm kind of curious to see where other teams go, where I kind of see like maybe Liquid potentially being a little bit, I wouldn't say more of a threat, but as people that have that viability simply because, I mean, we can't discount guys like Scream and Jamppi on LAN, right? So it's like, you have to like at least put that into play. So it's like you might think, oh, well, Liquid may not be as strong. Well, it's like, well, they got these guys on LAN. You have to like factor that into the mix. So for me, I think it's going to be an excellent game. I think if anything, that's going to be like a tone setter as to where things are going to be dictated. I think Sentinels is probably going to win. If you think Fnatic is going to win, like, I could get behind that because they're going to have to butt heads. They're going to have to face each other, and whoever wins that game is most likely going to carry on through all the way up into the upper finals, grand finals potentially on there. So, you know, I think that's going to be one of the most important games we see in this whole entire tournament, and I think that it's going to probably go to 3. But if I think maybe like the Shazam storyline against Boaster is probably more than like seeing like how TenZ just gonna dominate, because we're gonna expect something like that, and if we don't, then what's gonna happen there? Like, is Fnatic gonna be able to overpower that and overcome that? Are some of the guys on Sentinels that are very, very good players able to kind of pick up that slack? I mean, where can we go? I have faith in those guys because I've seen them play, and I've seen them guys like Shazam, Sick. I mean, they've done pretty well on LAN in their respects, you know, and I think that they're gonna be able to carry some of that experience through in this.
And I'm glad you touched on the kind of Shazam versus Boaster thing here, right? Because, Mitch, we know it with Boaster. He is one that is like playing against all of the guys he idolized and looked up to when he was coming up as a CS player. Now he's here competing against them. But he doesn't get nervous about it. He makes his funny tweets, you know, he gets cocky and confident with it.
Yeah, you know, I wonder if he's actually sat back and thought about it, that was his dream going way, way back. We heard that from him, but before it even seemed realistic that was possible.
Before Fnatic, right?
Well, way before Fnatic. Yeah. You're talking way back in Summon FC. You're talking a completely different roster to what we have now. Like, this was his dream. And I wonder if he sat back and thought about the fact that he's at Masters and Angel isn't. Like, he's actually surpassed him, at least in this stage, which is pretty impressive considering coming into Valorant, I didn't put any props on Boaster's name on the UK scene in general. These were not the guys that we expected to see, that the majority of players from EU going from EMEA make that. So CIS and Turkey included are British. What's going on there? That was not expected. I'll say that. Left field for sure. But I think, like, Yeah, in terms of that matchup, I really like the fact that we're extending past that, because obviously on the question of TenZ being a good replacement and stuff, he's unreal. We already know that. I like the fact that we're bringing up all this about Sentinels. That's one aspect I'd actually overlooked, was the fact that they have a very tenured history within Counter-Strike playing at LAN events, whereas Fnatic don't. So yeah, that's going to be a pretty big factor. As well as that, Sentinels have the advantage of watching that match first. They get to watch Fnatic play up against Crew, and then I think it's the next day they'll be playing each other. So that's pretty phenomenal, because they're probably preparing for Fnatic right now. Then they're going to get to watch them play, and Fnatic, they've got to focus on Crew, because okay, they've got a pretty heavy advantage coming in against that LATAM team, but it's not like Crew can't beat them. And Crew are definitely going to be doing their homework up against Fnatic. As I said, I'm pretty sure these guys have already watched a lot of Fnatic VODs in developing their own game style, because when you look at the VODs of Crew playing, it really feels like they're trying their best to put on that Fnatic mask. So coming up against them, it's almost like a mini Boaster and Angel, in that Crew will be looking up to Fnatic and wanting to dethrone them.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like when it comes to like the Sentinels guys and even like the LAN thing, like we do have to like at least take into consideration this is not going to be one of those, like, it is a major, but it's not gonna be one of those LANs with like a ton of like audience and things like that. It's gonna be a little bit, you know, more of like studio kind of feel. So there is that element to it, but I do think that this is where, you know, we're gonna have to see a little bit of that LAN tenure, because this is gonna kind of be more of like those group stage type feels and things like that. But there's like a serious factor, and you kind of have to create your own like hunger and fire inside and like kind of block it out, regardless of how many fans or people that are there, regardless, because there will be a lot of people there, and you still have to block out the cameras and things like that regardless. So I think that this is going to be something that's very interesting to watch.
And fRoD, I want to ask you a bit more on the Sentinel side of things when it comes to TenZ, right? Because I personally don't think Sentinels would be at this event if TenZ was not on the team, and I can't see any way where they're ever going to let him go at this point. Like, I feel like what they've got as a team now, and as a core, this is just something you can build upon. I can't see, even if they didn't do so well here, even if they didn't get the result they wanted, like this right now just seems to be the good mix for this NA team.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at someone like TenZ, he's like one of those like generational type talents that you have to foster him. And I think that a lot of the importance when you see that is not just about, it's probably more important like who's around him. And it seems like the crew of Sentinels has a really good environment around him, you know, kind of stepping into like a winning environment, showcasing that he could be a part of the boys and win with them. I think it's massive, and if anything, that they got to go all in with him, because this might be the best situation that he's ever had and ever going to have as far as like the potential crew around him. And that's where I think that you see, like, you give credit to guys like Shazam, who've like given up like the Jet, all that kind of role, just to be able to make do for him and just be like, look, I just want to win, we'll see it through. And you know, like because that kind of brings me to the other side too, like you're talking about like IGLs, right? And you know, in NA, like that's one of our problems, like we kind of suffer with the fact that we have a lack of IGLs. So we've had to have like either guys that are IGLs that kind of come through, or guys like Shazams that step up to the plate and they've like committed fully. So it's like a much different environment than like guys like Boaster, who are like homegrown, like been wanting to do this. But at the same time, like this is a good matchup for that. You know, other teams, like maybe this is why someone like V1 was able to go that far with like an established IGL like Vanity in that way. But Shazam has done a great job, and I'm interested to see how like the strategic side of it goes, because yeah, you know, a good portion of your strats is going to be like, hey, TenZ, go at him, boy. And then it's like, what are you going to do with the other part of the strats or the other elements or the things that when he's dead, or if he dies in those rounds? And like, you know, there's a big element to how the strategic side's going to go, and I'm kind of curious to see how Shazam like kind of responds to that, but I think he'll do a good job of it. Now
we have to also, because okay, you kind of outnumbered here, fRoD, I'm not going to lie. You got two EU guys with you, but this EU versus NA thing, it's been the smack talk on Twitter, it's been the debate from the very start of Valorant. Now we finally get into it, and we've got a good showing of opportunity here for these matchups to go down if it can work out the way we expect. But I think right now, like, even if we just look at it as one event, and for me, I don't really care too much on this, is that EU versus NA is a big thing, sure, but right now, we are in such an early part that I can't see it really being like whoever wins, okay, yeah, they got that one event, but I don't see it making that big of a difference, because you'll know this from when we came into like CS, for example, it was always something where like NA could start off very strong, maybe it slowed down when it came into the later parts of the game, and they were kind of in the mid-tier to the highest points. But with Valorant, I actually look at the whole region and what talent pool they have, the opportunities are out there. They just have a greater strength right now. It's probably one of the best starts we've seen for NA in terms of an FPS game.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, just to not name any names, but the downfall of a scene in a different game propels the other scene. And I think the thing is, like, the EU and the NA side, like, the cream of the crop is always going to be the best, and we're going to be able to butt heads properly. The reason why I think that we may have more teams that can compete versus EU having less teams that can compete, and like maybe we have like, you guys had like 4, 5, 6 teams that can kind of compete at a pretty high level. We may have like 8, 10, 12 teams, but I think a lot of it boils down to, like I said, the fact that, you know, a specific scene is dying, and then the other scene in the other game is thriving, and you're in the EU. So it's like, there's still so much opportunity. Like, we've had so many different players that were in like pro leagues and tier 1.5, tier 2 type scenes that they immediately had opportunities removed, jumped straight into Valorant, never looked back. And in EU, that really didn't happen, you know. And it's not to knock on some of the EU players, the stars that are playing here, but they're not the tier 1.5 active pros. They were more of the guys that were maybe, you know, on the sideline, like, hey,
definitely.
Yeah.
You know, like, are they going to continue on? Like, other than maybe Jamppi, for example, different story. But so it's kind of like, I'm curious to see how that all plays out. But at the end of the day, everything all catches up. All scenes catch up. All players from all different scenes catch up. We may have a better start. We'll just see how it all goes through. But I think at the end of the day, the reason why you see a lot more of the NA teams being successful is because of, like I said, a specific scene just completely being killed out. And then just all those like really talented pro league level type players just diving headfirst into this game and never looking back, you know?
One of the things we've actually had a lot of luck with, and I don't know if it's the same in NA, but at least in EU, I know in Counter-Strike in NA, a lot of the players have jumped over. I mean, when you look at someone like TenZ is very reminiscent of like Jamppi jumping over, but like you said, Jamppi's a slightly different situation. But we've got a lot of Fortnite guys, like even within Masters, Doma, for example, I'm pretty sure his background was in Fortnite, jumping over and just showing that they've got insane depth. And then they're being crafted by players like Boaster, players like Angel, who, okay, in terms of the top level kind of gunplay, maybe they're not quite there in Counter-Strike, but certainly matching up in Valorant for now, and then being able to mold these young talents that come in from games where they're extremely mechanically gifted, and then getting to sort of learn TAC FPSs, which I don't think I would call Fortnite, to be honest, but it's a different set of skills, let's put it that way.
Certainly.
I think we definitely have a really nice boost from that. But yeah, for the most part, it has been like Counter-Strike players that are winding down towards the end of their career. Even like when you think of someone like Scream, you know, I don't think he had the option to go onto any top 5 team before in Counter-Strike before he jumped over to Valorant. I think he was sort of in this thing of like, I could start from like a tier 2 and try to grind it up, like your kind of Gamer Legion style area that he was in, and then he decided, you know what, screw it, I can just go and, you know, make some big bucks and be a big player in this brand new FPS title, and well, he certainly has been.
Scream right now, right? He kills it. For me, like, just movement, crosshair placement, we know, like, aim-wise, his reactions are ridiculous. But he's also going up against a player like TenZ in that scenario. If you look at it as the head-to-head, and you think, TenZ is so young in comparison. Like, Scream here, he is a veteran, he knows what he's doing with it all. But it's like, how much more time has, like, some of these guys even got if they want to play at this level? Or do we just consider this to be, like, age ain't really a factor anymore? Like, we can extend it further, Mitch.
You know, I think that's a really interesting topic, and I've been talking to some of my friends who work over in Fortnite, actually, about this whole thing, because when you look at the player, like the average age in that esport, it's very, very low, much lower than anything else, I think any other esport out there. And it was interesting because he was saying that he was reading some studies, and they were saying that your actual, like, the typical thing is like, oh, kind of, you know, he's like 25, his reaction time, it's starting to go down. You want your 16-year-old, 17-year-old players, but actually in terms of reaction time, he was saying most people peak around 24, and it's about as much of a decline as it is a gain before. So what that means is, like, a 26-year-old player technically by that model is closer to their peak and performing better than a 16 or 17-year-old is, than a 20-year-old is even. And if you take that as truth, and again, I have to look into that a little bit more, but it seems to kind of pan out within Valorant at least. You know, a lot of these guys are towards the kind of mid to late 20s even, are still performing, are still putting up numbers. And I think if you were to remove the names or put someone in there that didn't necessarily know their ages, you wouldn't really be able to tell kind of who are the young guys, who are the old guys.
We were doing an interview with Angel, and like Mitch likes to poke fun at how much older I am with him. And obviously Angel's older than me. Me and Angel used to play some games against each other back in the day. And he's like, Mitch, maybe you should not say that anymore. Angel called you out. What, God B called you out as well, you know, Mitch? Yeah. So you keep sending yourself into the fire with this, because, you know, listen, us old boys, we can rock it.
Yeah. Hey, look, we're all still around. We're not going anywhere. You know, we're all probably going to retire here. You know, we'll be 60 and talking like that too. So, and the thing too that I want to say too about like the storyline of like the talent versus talent. I think if anything, what I'm curious to see in like a potential Scream versus TenZ showdown, like super talent versus super talent, is more of like how the team and the strategies envelop those players. Because if Liquid is going to potentially focus heavily on the strategy side and then maybe have Scream fit within a system, is Scream going to be able to have those legitimate 1v1s and opportunities to kind of flex on TenZ, if that? But then if you have TenZ kind of shooting him out there, like, is he going to style on them? Like, how's it going to be? Like, is it going to be TenZ shutting him down? Like, I think that if anything, it's kind of curious to see how teams strategize around some of these super talented players and go on with it, especially when they're going to be playing some like similar agents, similar roles, like duelists. Like, I mean, is you know, in certain cases, you might have some duelists that are going to be maybe more passive with their utility, focus their utility more on the team-oriented side, retake side. Let's say you're playing defense. Or you can have people that are just like, yo, go out there, go crazy, do your thing, and, you know, we'll play 4vx, whatever you can kind of get us through. And at the end of the day, I think that as long as you kind of are honest with yourselves and like the identity that you kind of run, and you don't limit your player within that, I think that it's gonna, you know, they'll do well. And this is like a major event. Guys like Scream, they're gonna have to bust out all the stops. Like, I know that he may not be some sort of like jet crazy main guy, but I've seen him go absolutely hard with like Reyna or even other agents. Like if he wants to go battle Sage and just like hold W constantly with Sage or something like that. Like, I want to see how he can flex his muscle within the system when, you know, when they play against each other.
Now, there's one thing we've touched on a little bit throughout all these conversations, right? Is the fact, yes, we're back on LAN. Now, for me, when I'm looking at this, we talked about it, Mitch, you said the Koreans, right, they had a few LANs to play on, then other teams maybe not played any LANs at all. This is the first going into it. fRoD, you mentioned also with there not being an audience, that being one factor of it all as well, because that's like less pressure. We know what it's like when you're in the stadiums and everyone's cheering and chanting around you. So some of them got like an easier way in. But for me, I don't think when it comes to Valorant inside of like the actual gameplay, when it comes down to this, I don't think the LAN's going to make that much of a difference, because look, they're all now basically in the same hotel room, right? They're all playing now in a position where it's boot camp mode, and they've had a good amount of time for it. So I don't think it's going to be that big of a factor this time around. I just think it's going to be the nerve side of things that we look at when it comes to LAN, Mitch.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think like when you look at the nerves on LAN, it's going to be a very small percentage of the players that are going to be extremely badly affected by it, if any. When there's a crowd, it's a whole different ball game, but without one, I think exactly as we were saying, like it sort of becomes like a studio event almost. These guys are going to see their opponents. I think that's pretty much the only difference to their boot camps, provided everybody's been on boot camps, which I think at this stage most of, if not all, the teams will have been, so they'll be kind of used to playing with their teammates. Like we said, Fnatic, for example, did that 10-day boot camp. Plus, they're now practicing in the training facility over in Reykjavik. So, at this stage, I think the main issue is going to be, you know, that's the guy I'm facing right over there. How much that's going to affect them, I don't really think it will, because they will have experienced at least, you know, what a local LAN feels like, what playing in a room with other gamers, probably lacking a lot of deodorant based on the UK LANs I've been to. And so it's not going to be that much different, because there isn't a crowd there. It's just a couple more lights on you.
You can hear each other, like, yelling at each other. Like, when you could celebrate, like, sometimes that could take you out of the game. Like, if certain teams, like, celebrate too loudly, or if the other team hears you celebrating. I mean, there are certain elements, like you said, potentially seeing your opponent. You know, there's so much to it that, you know, it obviously has nothing to do with the crowd. So it's probably going to be more of that, the personal pressures that you may have to deal with, or like the potential storylines that you see. And it's a lot of those cases that you probably see a lot of athletes just like stay away from social media. It's probably good to do that in that case, to kind of like get away from the storylines and just kind of focus at the task at hand, and not let anything else kind of get into your own head in something that is like a studio land, like nothing that should be too like out of element that you've never seen before. If anything, probably a fraction of what some of these guys have been at before.
Now, next topic, and Mitch, this is a fun one for you because I know you like to get a little bit crazy when we're looking at some of these Asian compositions. Okay. What are we thinking, mate? Like, are we saying, I don't know, what's the best Asian compositions you're looking at across some of these maps? You already spoke about some of the double duelists, other teams not going for it. Some teams now rocking no duelists at all that we've seen find some big success as well. And is there anything you think that like is a must, right? Because we know some teams still not implementing any use of Astra in there, for an example, you know, like that side of it. So what are you thinking?
I think like Astra Viper Rays right now is like a core 3 are super, super strong. In terms of smokers, there's value to be seen depending on how you want to play it. Like you'll see a lot of post-plant play in EU, so that's where obviously you can bring a Brimstone in. But Omen's Flash still the best in the game. Still cannot be touched in that department. So there's a lot to be said for the smoking role. There's a lot to be said about playing Sentinel or playing Viper as a core Sentinel / controller with Astra backing her up. There's a lot that can be done, but I think right now, like your Astra Rays combinations are very, very strong from a lot of teams. Again, it's map dependent, but I think Astra can pretty much be played anywhere. And then Viper, even with the nerf that she received, which she lost 20 damage on her wall, so now when you walk through her wall, you instantly lose 30 HP instead. In buy rounds, in certain scenarios, that might not make much of a difference, but certainly still for pistols, it's pretty huge. And an MR12, when you've got pretty much free pistol control, that gives you a lot to work with rather. So yeah, I think those are the 3 kind of core agents, but the beauty of Valorant is that there's never going to be like a correct way to play it. It'll be the way that you have interpreted as a team that fits your players, and then it comes up against another that's equally as viable, and it's all about how you use it, and most importantly, how you adapt. That's the thing, like being able to think on your feet and adapt to whatever comp your enemies are running or how they're using it is just the #1 most important thing, regardless of what comp you're running.
Yeah, and I think like, you know, for me, gunplay kind of always reigns supreme in this game because I always got to have faith in like the 1v1 and the guy to do it. But, you know, you have to like respect the metas, and maybe it's not like the meta, but this whole post-plan stuff, like you have to have the utility. So I fully agree with you there on the comp side because there's so much vulnerability spells or like decays, and it's like chip damage, double damage, and like the way that some teams are playing, you don't really have that many teams that are like implementing Skye that has like heal, or Sage that her heal got nerfed, or even Skye and Sage. Can you even do that with some of these styles? I mean, it's kind of like, I don't even know if we're at the stage in Valorant where teams can sort of like counter picking a comp to a specific meta type comp yet. It's almost as if you have to kind of respect it, or kind of go, you could even go like halfway there if you want, but you do have to know that there are some teams out there that are going to kind of abuse on some of these things, like these delays, these utility battles, because when you have people like, whether it's like the post plant meta or even the time drain meta on like CT side, like, you know, some of these teams that they constantly like default slow things down, like the #1 rule, at least that I've always had, is to kind of be very stingy with your utility, because if teams are defaulting and not getting onto bomb sites, they're not really doing anything, so why are you wasting your utility, right? Yeah. If you end up draining the clock, being more respectful of the clock that's around there, and you kind of like start keeping tabs like 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 50 seconds left, and you kind of start doing that, you start chipping down at how much time is left based on how much utility you have. And teams that typically default play a little bit slower, you can just completely dominate them and choke them out with the utility. And with this, now that you can, you know, swirl people off of bomb sites or diffuses and plants, and you can, you know, put tons of smokes in front of places you got to force them to run through, or damaging abilities. I mean, if you're not doing a good job of clearing utility in this kind of meta, you're going to get destroyed, especially if the clock is not on your side.
Now, I'm going to take us to the next part of the show. We've got a couple of fun segments to go through next, and this one we get to call the showstopper. This is our player to watch at the event. Maybe it doesn't need to be the player that's like the most favourite in there. Maybe you've got a bit of a dark horse, you say someone to keep an eye on. And I'm going to start off, and okay, my one's maybe a bit easier here, but I'm going to go with Jamppi, because not only did he just move over to Valorant, right, and he's already looked really damn good. I can see you smiling already, Mitch, you know. But this guy, first of all, popped off, obviously individually, but he is still now just like had a little amount of time with this team. So I'm just more excited to see what he can do, because we all know what kind of a monster he can be, but like he's definitely not even close to his peak yet. So fRoD, you can go next. Who do you think it's going to be? Who's the one to look at?
I mean, I'm going to have to go with NA. I'm not going to go with the obvious of Sentinels. I won't go with Sentinels because obviously we all know who we're going to do. I really want to see V1 do well. It was either between Zelsis and Penny, but I'm gonna go with Zelsis just because I have a good history with him, and I know that he's that kind of guy that wants to go to LAN, wants to prove right, and he's got that kind of intense fire inside. So he's my guy there. I might have chosen Penny there just because I have a lot of respect for what he's doing, and I think that he's like an up and coming talent. Keep your eyes on him, but I think Zelsis is gonna kind of turn some heads out there, and I think he'll do well.
Mitch.
I mean, there's a lot of choice. I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit. You've taken NA, you've taken EU, so I'm going to go with South Korea. I'm going to say Latvia. I actually think Latvia is one of the most, maybe I wouldn't necessarily use the word underrated, because people that watch South Korea definitely rate him very, very highly. But I think for an NA and a majority EU audience, they're not going to know this guy, not going to know him very well, and they're not going to be ready for what they're going to see from him. I think he's going to be a big factor for Newturn coming throughout this tournament, and definitely take a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, and they have Solo and Perry there that are just some of the most old school, badass Counter-Strike players that we've ever seen in South Korea, and they're still gunning to this day. And these are the guys that took out their fellow OG in Glow recently. Unfortunately, forced them into retirement with that loss.
That was wild,
I mean, to see Solo and Perry come through and just take this one down and then start like nurturing some of this young talent that has some of these guys, I'm definitely excited there. Haven't studied them that much, but I've been following them like that, and wow, I really want to see them kind of. I like your pick there.
Yeah, that's actually really good. And I'm just on the Perry and the Solo thing. Solo is 33, Perry is 30, yeah? When they first came and they popped up onto the big events for 1.6, for anyone that never saw this, these guys came through. Maybe not the most like tactically crazy, but I remember like watching Fnatic try and do some executes right on some timing, and CT side, you're seeing the Koreans just push them, dominate him before they even knew what happened. Like, they weren't even expecting stuff to go down. Like, these guys were just raw machines, and the fact that they're still here, like, there's some potential as a team here to do some big damage. It's not just the experience, but it's like these guys have never stopped giving up trying to prove themselves. So yeah, it's gonna be
just that whole entire scene, like even Lunatic High and stuff like that before them, like they were just so wild and like so it's just crazy. That's why for me, I think the storylines of seeing all the countries and kind of seeing their styles come through, which are similar to previous FPS versions. Oh my god, I'm so excited. I guess the one part is that unfortunately we don't have like a full CIS or Russian team there to kind of let them just loose on everyone. But hey,
we'll get there. We'll definitely get there. Now, the next part, I'm going to throw up my Recon Bolt, and it's prediction time. You guys have kind of given away little bits of this, of where you're going to go with it, and I've got a different choice to you all with it, because I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the bracket, and I personally feel like with Liquid right now, they were there at the facility before, right? We know how good that Alienware facility is for Liquid. It's wild. Looks like the best one I've seen. On top of that, just the individuals we've got coming together. This version of Liquid has looked like the best we've seen in a long time. But they actually seem to be enjoying it as well, Mitch. They seem happy. They seem smiling. And I'm picking them straight up. That I think they can go all the way. I think they're going to take the big win here. Mitch, I know you're picking, but what's your reason? Yeah, of course.
Fnatic easy win. Yeah, I think they're going to take it now with the preparation. I think that the Fnatic Liquid final is going to be fantastic.
Oh, okay. So you're just going to lose in the finals of me. I understand. Yeah, it's always basically just the same way, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I was leaning originally to the bottom side of that bracket, like whether it be like putting the same kind of importance on that Liquid V1 game as we're doing on the Sentinels Fnatic game. But I don't know. I can't go against Sentinels, man. And TenZ on LAN, like he's built different. So I'm going the safe route there, For Sentinels,
Okay. So we're split. A couple of EU picks, which are kind of going to be obvious in there. If there's going to be one team I think that would cause a huge upset, though, it's going to be Newturn. I think the Koreans have the potential that they come through, no one expects it, they dominate, and then we see something wild where we could have a potential game where the Koreans dominate once again, but this time in an FPS, which has been a little while, right?
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. Like they got to play Sharks, and that's the Brazilian team, right? So I think that if right there, whoever wins that game, sign. I mean, they might be able to just upset one of the teams that we're not even talking to, the teams that we're overhyping in some ways, and straight into the upper finals if they do that, right? So it's like. Yeah. Whether the Korean or the Brazilian team, they might be poised for a top 3 finish, if they just get one or two of these wins.
I gotta be honest as well. Like, I really think I have to bring them up. I have to give them a couple of props here. Team Vikings, we haven't mentioned them at all, and I think they get left out of the conversation a lot within NA, within EU. They're unbelievable. They're another Brazilian team coming in. I think that they're by far the strongest chance for their region, and coming into the tournament, I wouldn't rate them as highly as Newturn. I think a very, very small gap between them, but I would put Newturn above them. But when Newturn with Vikings, if there's going to be upsets, I see those as the two teams that can really perform them and take EU or NA off their throne.
Well, let's see if EU or NA can even claim the throne. It may not be possible. It's just a few days away now, but we'll have to wait and see. This was another episode of Curveball coming your way. I hope you guys have enjoyed it from start to finish. We'll be delivering plenty more of these for you guys. Just breaking everything down, looking at the events that are coming in Valorant across multiple regions. So let us know in the comments your feedback. Let us know what you thought of it. And also, let us know who you think is going to take the win and see if you're going to be wrong, because we all know it's going to be Liquid. See you next show.